So happy to be here with you for the book club for the Ultimate Deployment Guide. Today, we are focusing on the topic of pregnancy and birth during deployment. So, if you're a mama and you are expecting, or you think you may be having a baby during this upcoming deployment, then this is the session for you. And if you aren't expecting, or you don't think you'll be having kids anytime soon, then you can certainly skip this session, or you can always watch it just to have future reference for resources and tips that may help you during that time. So, I want to tell you, first of all, if you are struggling with all the emotions and all the stress and challenges of pregnancy and birth during deployment, then certainly I sympathize because I have been there. I know that this is a very hard time, and I'm here to support you through that challenge. I can tell you my story, and I just give the caveat that I'm sharing it because it is a hard story, and I want people to take courage and inspiration from some of the experiences that I went through. Do not expect that every single birth story during deployment will be like mine. Mine's a little bit of an exception, but I want you to see that if someone else can go through it, then you can too. So I will tell you that I am now the proud, happy mom of 5 beautiful children, and they're all healthy and everyone is doing well. But child number 2 was born 2 weeks before a deployment. And in fact, the deployment date had been continually extended. So for a long time, we thought that my husband would have already been deployed before he was born. And I had to come up with, at the same time, 2 different birth plans. One in the state where we were stationed, if my husband was still around, and my backup plan was in a completely different state if I had to move home to be near my parents and deliver at a civilian hospital if we were already a few months into my husband's deployment. So it was an extremely stressful time trying to figure out what the military was doing, what I was doing, how long we could drag things out and wait to make a decision. And I can tell you that there is a little bit of relief and comfort that can be offered in having a birth plan and developing a plan B and a plan C just in case something changes. And so that's why you see in the deployment guide, we have a birth plan laid out for you. Obviously, every mom is going to fill this out in a different way. There's no one right way to do your own personal birth plan. But I have found that the more that you write things down and organize them and think through them, the less scary that experience will feel. So that was my child number 2. He ended up being born in December. 2 weeks later, my husband deployed to Afghanistan and was gone for 7 months. So that whole deployment, I was raising a toddler and a baby, and it was busy. It was difficult. We had, a number of concerns and health issues, but we got through everything just fine. And my husband returned from deployment and was enjoying his time in between deployments. And sure enough, around the time that we learned that he's deploying again next year, we also learned that I am now expecting baby number 3. Now, baby number 3 was a whole different situation because at this point, we knew that my husband was deploying in the middle of the summer and I wouldn't be delivering for about a month or 2 later. And so there was no way that my husband was allowed to stay until the birth. And we also knew that there was no way he would be able to return for the birth. Now, he's a Marine and this was a combat deployment. So at that time, they were not allowing anyone to return. I know that nowadays the situation really does depend on your individual service member's job, on their branch, on the location of their deployment. So there are times when service members can get permission to return for a birth. Sometimes they get 2 weeks of leave to be able to come home and hopefully be there around the time of the birth and maybe for about a week afterwards, and then they return to the rest of their deployment. But that's not always a guarantee. So even if your service member is working on that permission and you're hoping that that will be your situation, you have to make sure that you have that backup plan just in case. If they aren't able to come back for whatever reason, you go into labor early, their combat situation status changes and they aren't allowed to return. Any number of things can come up that would interrupt their travel plans and force you to be alone for the birth. you want to have people and friends in place that can support you. So, in my case, for baby number three, since we knew from the beginning of the pregnancy that my husband would not be present for the birth, it was a huge emotional burden. I remember for a long time when I was announcing the pregnancy, of course, everyone would say, "Congratulations." Everyone would say, "That's so exciting." And honestly, I didn't feel it. It was a long time before I accepted that pregnancy and felt that it was something to celebrate. Now, of course, I love my son now. He is wonderful, but I'm just being honest with you about all of the emotions and the hormones that appear early in pregnancy. It's um it's a very difficult and stressful time for a lot of moms, and it was it was a difficult pregnancy for me to accept. So for months and months, I was even just coming to grips with the concept that I'd be delivering without my husband. And then I got into planning mode. And we had the whole pregnancy to plan out where would I deliver, who would be with me to support me, because I already had two young children at home, who would be able to take care of them while I was at the hospital. These were all things that I had to think through. And I do encourage you to think through them also, especially if this is not your first birth. Have the phone numbers of people that you want to call when you go into labor or to help with your other children. Ask those people in advance, get those people lined up. And of course, you don't always know the exact day. Of course, you can't predict whether you're going to go into labor during the day or at night or when you're at work or when your neighbor is at work, but you can at least ask. And if you have those phone numbers and you have those plans in place, then it won't be such a stressful and panicking situation. The more that you can think through it and plan ahead, the more of that emotional stress you'll be taking off of your shoulders and putting it onto the paper and saying, whatever happens is going to happen, and I've decided I'm going to live with it, and here's how I'm going to address it when it comes up. So, filling out that plan and getting those phone numbers ahead of time is the best thing that you can do. Now, I will tell you my story, and like I said in the beginning, mine is unusual, so please don't be discouraged by this, but instead, I want you to see that you can overcome obstacles, you can overcome birth challenges, and everything will work out in the end. So, in my case, my husband deployed. It was a good month and a half later before I finally went into labor. I had made several plans. Actually, I had put several things in place to help me through this birth. One was that my mom was going to come down to stay with the other children. She was not going to go to the hospital with me, but she'd stay at my house to watch my toddler and my preschooler. So we had that all arranged and set up. The second plan that I made was for a birth doula to be with me in the hospital. A doula, which I have not used for my other births, but I do recommend, especially if you're going through deployment. A doula is a health professional, so this is a certified, trained person, a lot like a nurse, but a doula is a specific certification that can be separate from nursing. And it's someone who's trained in birth and deliveries, and that's their job. It's what they have experience doing. They are not the doctor, they're not the one doing the delivery typically, especially if you're in a hospital setting. They are the one who is speaking up for you. They are the one that's holding your hand and helping you breathe through the pain and count through the contractions. They are the ones that is trying to make you comfortable. They are the one that is speaking to the doctor on your behalf with any medical requests that you have or anything in particular that you've put into your birth plan about whether or not you want medication, what types of interventions you approve. Um, it's very difficult to answer questions sometimes and fill out that paperwork while you're in labor. So the doula can be there with you to help you complete paperwork, to help speak up for you. And when I explained it to my husband about how the doula would be there with me to hold my hand and to, you know, to help take care of me during the delivery, he said, "Oh, I get it. She's basically doing my job." And that's a really great way to look at it. I had already given birth before, so I kind of knew what to expect with my body. And I knew that I needed someone there with me. And the doula was able to kind of stand in for my husband and be that encouraging person that was there throughout the entire process. She was the one who drove me to the hospital once my contractions were close enough. She stayed with me through check-in because at first they were a little bit uncertain about whether or not it was time to check me in. She was able to speak up to the doctor and ask relevant medical questions and provide some of the data from my contractions that encouraged them to admit me to the hospital. And she stayed with me throughout the process to encourage me, to talk to me, and to just be that helpful, calming presence during the delivery process. So at the time when I gave birth, my husband was on a combat deployment, and there was a group of doulas that was providing their services for free to people with deployed spouses. Now, the program I used is no longer free. They do now charge a service or a service fee, but they do have huge discounts for the military, and I think it's based on the service member's rank. So you're supposed to pay, what would be hopefully affordable and appropriate for your situation. So you can see a lot of the birth resources listed on this next page of the deployment guide. And these are mostly resources that are available across the country. They should be available near you and near your military base. I encourage you to go to each of their websites and check out the classes and the support that they offer. So Operation Special Delivery is the doula that I used. And I had those two things in place. I had my mom at my house, I had the doula taking me to the hospital, and the third plan that I made was I asked a friend who had given birth before. She was a mom of 4 kids at the time. I wanted her to be my friendly face with me in the hospital room. And I know people have mixed feelings about who you want with you. It's a very personal choice who to have with you when you're delivering. But I wanted someone who, well, first of all, had experience giving birth that wasn't going to, freak out or be nervous about it. I wanted someone with a great sense of humor. This was a friend that could always calm me down and encourage me and make me laugh. And I knew that she would be a positive presence during delivery. And you kind of just want someone to be there on your team, especially when your spouse cannot be there with you. It's so important to have an encouraging friend. So I had all of these things set up in place. And then what happened was a hurricane hit our town. This was a Category 3 hurricane. It was Hurricane Isabel in August of 2011. I was stationed in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, right on the North Carolina coast. And this hurricane was due to hit our town the same week that I was due to deliver our baby. And so suddenly all those plans changed. My due date came and went. I've been late on all of my babies, so this was not a huge surprise to me, but it was incredibly stressful and frustrating because the hurricane, if you've never been in a hurricane zone, you actually know several days in advance that the storm is coming. They watch the storms coming over the Atlantic so they can predict around what day they're going to hit and what intensity the storm is going to be. And everyone prepares in advance. So everyone runs to the store, everyone boards up their windows and brings in their outdoor furniture. A lot of people evacuated the area, although it wasn't a mandatory evacuation. And I could not do those things. I was now 40 weeks plus pregnant, past my due date. I was walking every day to try and encourage the baby to come out, and he was not coming out. I had the materials. We'd gone to the store. I'd made my preparations as best I could. My mom was in town, thankfully. She'd already arrived to be there for the birth. But we were really worried. People were evacuating the town because they were calling for an intense storm with several days of power outages. At first, the base announced that they would shut down, and I didn't even know if I'd be able to go to the hospital on base to deliver, which is where I was supposed to be going. And honestly, I was scared. I was very stressed. I was just overwhelmed that I had to go through this entire situation, not only without my husband giving birth during a deployment, and now there was a hurricane on top of it. And so what happened was the night that the storm hit is when I went into labor, which apparently is very common because the atmospheric pressure drops and all the babies like to come at once. And so I went into labor. I timed my contractions. The doula took me to the hospital, and that was all as planned. Um, the hospital had been shut down. The only thing open was the labor and delivery ward. So I was admitted. Um, it was a fairly straightforward birth, thank goodness. Nothing too crazy or unexpected happened. I was exhausted. It was mentally draining, but I did it, and I was so proud of myself and so relieved afterwards that I made it through this ordeal. The baby was healthy. The friend who was supposed to be with me in the hospital was not able to be there because the base was closed and her family was actually evacuating the city. So I was not able to have her with me. But I did have the doula, I did have my mom home with my other kids. And so at least I felt like I had done my best. We made it through the birth. Um, and unfortunately, that was only step one. Then that night, the hurricane hit the town and the hospital. The hospital lost power, which, yes, they have emergency generators, but that was only for the actual labor and delivery floor. I had already been moved up to a recovery floor. And so the first night in the hospital with my newborn baby, when I had not slept for, a day, we had to, the nurse came in and gave me a little camping lantern in case I needed to use the bathroom. And then an hour later, the nurse came in and brought us all into the hallway because there was a tornado warning with the high winds and all the trees that were falling down around town. They wanted to get everyone out of the rooms that had windows and move them into the hallways for safety. So we did that, and I evacuated into the hallway. And I sat there in the hallway with my newborn baby. And I looked around at the other couples who were there and had delivered their babies that day. And I was the only one without a husband. And it was the most alone and just alone, I think. It was the lowest point that I had felt during any of his deployments. I missed him in that moment more than any other time. And I was so devastated that he could not be there with me in that moment of, insecurity and stress and danger. And I thought that more than anything, why was my husband not here to help take care of me and our newborn baby? He was able to connect with us a little bit during the delivery process. He didn't have video. I know nowadays they usually have video capability. This was 2011, and again, it was combat in Afghanistan, so he didn't have high-tech internet at his location. But he did have a communications tent, and once they got the word that I was in labor, he was allowed to go to the comm tent and stay there for the day and use the computers. So we used Google Apps or Google Hangouts actually, to type back and forth to each other. We were essentially sending text messages throughout the labor and delivery process. And at one point, I typed on my phone, getting ready to push. And the next thing he received was a picture of our newborn son. So that was at least a wonderful moment that I could share with him. Nowadays, there is better technology. A lot of times, the service member can be present through video chat. You have to check with your hospital ahead of time because they are sensitive to having recordings of any type of medical procedure, including birth. But usually, if the service member, can kind of be just facing your head and looking at you, not looking at the rest of the room and what's happening with the birth, then that works out best for everyone. So he was present with me earlier in the day. But at that point, the delivery was over. We were in recovery. He had gone from the comm tent and gone back to his responsibilities on deployment. And at that moment, I was alone. And that was when I needed support more than ever. And so that is why it is so important to me that moms who are pregnant or expecting or delivering during deployment, I want to be there for you and give you support and make sure that you have made as many of these plans as possible so that you have people that will be with you at different times. Don't just think about the delivery, but think about that 24 to 48 hours afterwards when you will be in the hospital. You will probably be in pain, even though they give you some medicine. And you may or may not have complications, that would require you to be, sometimes the baby ends up, in a different part of the hospital and separated from you. You might need a friend or another adult to be going back and forth between your room and the baby's room, and either relaying messages or milk, or assisting you to go and take care of the baby and do what needs to be done. So I definitely struggled during that 48-hour recovery process in the hospital, when we didn't have power, and because there was no power, there was also no food. And if you are a mom who has ever given birth, you know that you get hungry because you're not really supposed to eat for the 24 hours that you're in labor and before you give birth. In case they need to do an emergency C-section, they don't want you to have a solid amount of food in your stomach. And so you're already hungry. You go through this extremely physical ordeal, you're exhausted, and usually you get a really good meal afterwards. And unfortunately, because the hospital was out of power, there was no food. They literally gave me a package of granola bars and fruit snacks, and that was my meal after delivering the baby. And then we weren't allowed to leave the hospital. Even though I would have been checked out, it had been more than 24 hours after delivery, and I had a vaginal birth, so I was walking around and I was mobile, and I would have been checked out as a patient, but the roads were still closed. Our whole town was shut down because of the hurricane. The base was closed, so I couldn't leave. And that meant that they had to kind of move me into another room that was sort of this outpatient holding room. And the only way I could get food there, since I was no longer a hospital patient, was I had to carry the baby, walk down several flights of stairs because all the power was out. There were no elevators. And if you've given birth, you know that stairs are not your friend afterwards. I had to carry the baby downstairs to go to a food truck outside to buy some food and take it back up to my room. And so we did that for another couple of meals until finally the roads were cleared enough, the base reopened, my parents were able to come and pick me up, and thankfully I got home and could finally have real food and relax. My house was fine. It was not damaged in the hurricane. My kids were fine. Everything was okay once we got through that probably about 3-day ordeal in the hospital. And so I share this story with you not because I want you to be afraid, not because I want you to be scared of giving birth on your own, because I want you to see that anything is possible. If I can give birth during a hurricane, during a deployment, not have food afterwards, then I promise you that you can get through this too. And whatever ridiculous challenge the deployment throws your way, whether it's a storm or a power outage or a friend that can't make it with you to the hospital for whatever reason, or your childcare falling through for whatever reason, or you being delayed at the hospital longer than expected for whatever reason, power outages, medical complications, storms, lots of things can happen. But the more that you have prepared and in place, the smoother things are going to go. So that's why it's important, if you are expecting during deployment, take the time to fill out your birth plan and to collect the phone numbers of the people that are going to support you during your pregnancy, during your delivery, and during your recovery. Think through all of those stages individually, because you will need support through all of them, and it might be different people supporting you at different times. And then finally, again, please check out these free resources for parents. They're all listed here in the guide. All of them have their own website with additional information about how to sign up, which areas of the country they operate in, and all of them have great programs for expecting moms. So I hope that you can see that having a baby during deployment is never easy. It's certainly intimidating and certainly stressful, but it definitely is possible. And once you do have a baby during deployment, you will realize that you are part of this very interesting, very exclusive club of women who have been through this ordeal and survived to tell the tale. And it is something that you can always be proud of yourself and amazed at your own courage and strength to get through that. So, if that's you, then I certainly am here to encourage you and support you through that situation. And I do hope you'll check out the links in the comments. I have some additional articles that I've written about this topic that I hope will help you in your birthing experience. So, thank you so much for joining us in today's special episode of the Book Club. Let me know if you have any questions or any ideas that you need to follow up on. And I will see you next time. This has been Lizanne, the Seasoned Spouse.